Welcome to No Limit Nerd. Today I'm combining polymer clay sculpting with a little 3D printing to bring a zombie build to life. Handcrafting the body, adding a 3D printed skull with headphones, and giving it some artistic flair to create a one-of-a-kind figure. So let's dive in and see how it goes. Okay, so if you watched any of my previous videos, you'll notice that I use a wooden block, 18mm plywood, and I've created a little armature using armature wire to help give my zombie a little bit of a shape. With that, I then get my Cosclay out and start basically building up the profile of what the zombie will look like. Add some clay to the back, to the front, use my sculpting tool to blend it in, and there we have it, the base figure. It doesn't look great at this point. It's never going to look great at this point. It's just to give us a base to put our clothes on, which is exactly what we're doing now. So I cut up some thin sheets of Cosclay that I've rolled through my pasta maker, because, you know, who uses a pasta maker for pasta anymore? And then I wrap it around the main body, cut it a little bit to size, and at the end you'll have a basic jacket for what our zombie is wearing. Now again, it's a zombie, it doesn't have to look great. At this point, we're going to do some fine touches later. As you can see, I'm giving a bit some trousers there, it's got a bit of a rip in it to show some skin later. Ooh, giving a bit of a butt crack, hope that doesn't hurt too much. And giving him a shirt, so just between the jacket, just to give him some stand out a little bit more. Now I'm going to add some fine touches to his legs, just smoothing it all out. Ooh, here comes the shoes, just shaping them into the board, making sure they're in the right direction to make him look like he's a bit staggered. Then it was time to roll out a bit of a worm in order to add some detail to around the tops of the shoes. See me just put it in there. Then it was time to move on to add some detail to the jacket. I used my scalpel to create some tears and more rips around the edges to look like he'd rolled through a hedge backwards. I then made a little pocket for the guy and added it to his right butt cheek. It was then time to give my desk a little bit of a clean up, get all that excess clay that's been bothering me around, before adding a little detail to the top of his jacket, a little zipper. And then I decided that there wasn't enough flesh coming through his jacket, so I decided to cut a little hole into the side so we can see a little bit more zombie skin coming out later when we get around to painting it. Now it's time to roll out another worm, slightly skinnier one. This was to make his fingers, so I ended up just using my scalpel there to cut 5 fingers, pretty much the same length, and then we'll just do a little bit of tidy up later. I used a little bit of excess of the clay to form the palm of the hand, and then off camera I just tidied it up a little bit and made a little bit of an arm to try and add onto the armature. As you can see there, it's all very wibbly wobbly, and oh look, there's another hand, one on the other side. And now I've cut some thin strips of clay to create some cuffs around the edge of the jacket to tidy up the connection between the hand and the jacket itself. It makes it a little bit more neater, as if the zombie has grown a bit, before moving on to some very small little details onto the shoes. These are the shoelaces, which I rolled up some little worms for, and I'm just, with my little pokey tool, trying to shape them into place, make them look a little bit like they're untied, a little bit all over the place. Next up, I used my sculpting tool to just add a little bit of zipper detail onto the jacket. There we have it. It's pretty much complete at this point. I've added a few more details, which you'll see a little bit later. And now it's on to painting the body. So it's been baked, it's been primed at this point in some grey primer, and it's time to start painting. I start with the white, give it a bit of a white shirt, before mixing the green, some green and some bone white, I believe it was together, some goblin green and some bone white, to create the zombie looking hand colour. Add a little bit of detail into the leg, where the flesh is sticking out. And this is just base colours, we'll go over them again later to create some more detail, some more highlights and depth. I mixed up some blue, and as you see, some super speed painting here. Yeah, I'm not really that fast in real life. And I'm just giving it a base coat of a darkish kind of blue for the jacket, making sure I get all the little spaces, all the little nooks and crannies, before moving on to the trousers. Now I wanted the trousers to stand out a little bit. I didn't want the same colour kind of blue, so I added a bit of brownish cream to the mix. They'll get a little darker later. And then it was time to just roughly paint a base coat for the shoes in a white. I think I messed up there and made it a little bit of a creamy white on the first shoe. I'll go back over that later and make it a little bit brighter white. And there I am, adding a bit of a wash to the jacket, just to add a little bit of depth to the colours. Doesn't have to be perfect. You've got to remember, this is a zombie. He's wearing whatever clothes he died in, and they've probably been through something. Adding a bit of light blue to the cuffs, just to make them stand out from the rest of the jacket, which I think it does. And then we're on to adding the little bit of green flesh poking out of the arm that we cut through earlier on in the sculpture. Just to add a little bit more detail, so when you spin around it's not just plain jacket. And you can see now I'm adding a few highlights of a lighter mix of green to the hands, just uneven colours, just to give a little bit of depth and character, before moving on to the shoes, which had a little inspiration from a certain shoe brand. We went for bright red, so we've got white soles, bright red uppers, and then we'll add in some black detail in a minute, which you'll see. I had to give the shoes a couple of coats of red to make sure they actually stood out over the white. And then here we are with the little black details on the laces. Make sure it's a bit fiddly to paint. Didn't want to get any on the red. I didn't want to have to repaint over the top of it again and do any touch-ups as much as I could. And you might notice I've left the little white splatter around the base. This will come into effect later when we do the finishing touches. But at the moment I'm just adding the little black to the fronts of the shoes and up the sides, and making sure it just looks a little bit different. And there we are, the body's pretty much complete at this point. A little few touches later, and it was on to 3D printing the skull head. Now originally I'd made a zombie looking head, but I didn't really like it, so I decided to revert back to one of my skulls that you might have seen in the previous video. This time I added some headphones, and you can see a little loop there for a keyring, which again will show up in another video. And it was on to time to painting the skull, so I moved that little loop, and then it was time to crack on with some skull colours. So I wanted to go with a kind of realistic bone colour, so I ended up using some bone white, some mixed with some white and some brown. There you go, wife's hairdryer's in there again. Does like to make an appearance in my videos. And then it was time for me to not get my fingers all painted up, and added it to a bit of armature wire onto a cork. Makes for a handy little holder to hold the skull in place. And then after the base coat of the white was done on the skull, I then moved and focused onto the headphones, adding just some plain black acrylic to the headphones. Make sure they're covered. Trying not to go over the white I'd already painted, because it makes it a little bit harder to cover. As you can see, slowly does it. And then it was back onto the skull, adding a few darker shades and a few patches here and there to make it a little bit more realistic. Again, this is a figure, it's not a realistic sculpture that I'm making here. Then I add some touches of red to the No Limit Nerd logo onto the side of the headphones. Moving on to the finishing touches, we can see me just add some rocks or little mini stones I've added later. You can also see that white splatter that I told you about earlier. It sees the trail of white that the zombies walked through. He must have walked through some white paint, and I'm adding a few touches to the base. And there we have it. It's a finished figure, the zombie figure with skull head and headphones, ready for the reveal. I hope you enjoyed this mashup between 3D printing and Polymer sculpting. Leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. And if you'd like to help me out with the least amount of effort, then hit the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on No Limit Nerd.